Hi, how you doing? Nice to see you. This is a Scottish summer's evening, as you can tell. 28.5 degrees today in London, and we have torrential rain for 4 hours. We've lost a few casualties to the weather. Don't blame them. I appreciate you all the more for coming here and getting soggy with us this evening. I'm Michael Pedersen. I'm the writer in residence at Edinburgh University. And a big thank you to Lighthouse Books for hosting us tonight. Incredible bookshop, such a vote of beauty on the literary scene in Edinburgh. And we're also live streaming the event. We've got some people zooming in for that. So hi out there in the digital ether. But the whole notion of doing this event quickly coming together was because I got an email by one of my colleagues at the university who said a brilliant poet is coming to Edinburgh. Would you be able to put on a wee bookshop event with her and read alongside her and introduce her and bring all of that? And I said, who's the poet? And then she sent me a message saying it was Maya C. Popa. And I said, of course I'll fucking do that. You have to quality test these things, but the quality shot through the roof. So I'm super excited to get that email, especially because this beautiful book is just such a sort of tender, transient, beautiful, whimsical, heartbreaking, fierce, and really tender ride through so many different poetic forms and little pieces of your life. And it's just such an extraordinary read. I'd read it before and then I guzzled it back in the day before doing this event. I like to be as close to being in Maya's head as I can as an objective reader. But some of you might be new to Maya's work, so I've brought a clipboard full of facts. Not just any clipboard, though, a sparkly clipboard with Michael on the back of it. If you're going to turn up with a clipboard, you have to mean the business. So Dr. Maya C. Popa is, as I've said, a complete bolt of literary luster. She's a prize-winning poet. She's the poetry reviews editor at Publishers Weekly. She's a teacher of poetry at NYU and elsewhere. And of course, she holds one of the most fascinating PhDs in poetry I've ever heard of, which we're not going to do any spoilers about at this point in time, and we'll get into that as the night canters forwards. She's published in so many fancy places, from TLS to like Poetry Magazine, and of course, she's the author of that incredible collection, Wound is the Origin of Wonder, that I just flashed before you with its shining gold leaves of beauty. I could say more about Maya, but I would rather hear some of her poems. We'll read a bit for you, and then we'll chat, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions yourself. Once we've done that, how does that sound? Good. There's no plan B to be quite frank, apart from persevering with that under slightly more awkward circumstances. So I will pass over this section of the room to Maya and sit on that low-facing but very cool 70s looking retro chair. If you could join me in giving her a warm round of applause.
That was the best intro. You hyped me up big time, and I can't. It's gonna be really. Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Told me it was all
They told you I was. They told you I was tall. No. Okay, it's fine. This is perfect. I'm so thrilled to be here. I've just gotten off a 5-hour train ride and still have jet lag from arriving here a few days ago. So I thought I would dress like a priestess from outer space. I think this would put us all at ease if I did it. I don't know. It was a bold move, but also Michael's so cool that I'd seen photos. Like we've never met in real life. I've just seen photos and been like, wait, what do I have to wear that will match him? So I felt done that this was the right choice. Okay, no, it was not a doing. There's no way I could do. I'm just gonna read one poem from my first book, and then just a few from Wound, but don't worry, they're all grim. So I know you came to get existentially mixed up tonight, and I promise to deliver on that. So the first, American Faith, is the book about public and again, thank you to Lighthouse for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you. It's a book about public and private violence and sort of my perspective on it. I'm the daughter of Romanian refugees. I was born in the States and raised speaking Romanian and French, and I attended a French school. So my whole kind of introduction to American politics, I didn't take an American history class until I was 17 because my school didn't offer them, even though I was growing up in the United States. And then around the time of the Trump election, I got to see sort of the worst of everything. And this is a poem. Well, this is a poem about bees, so I don't know why I just gave that intro, but just to frame it, it's a book that is interested in sort of extinction, but what does that actually mean? And do we mean the natural world or do we mean people? The bees have been canceled. Never again the humming saddled flowers. Never the blind oath by a velveteen prisoner. Never the yellow hula hooped in black little engine left running late into the darkness. Oh, how they were charming, clever monographs. Sunlight couldn't save them from the angel of extinction. Virgil said they swell with nectar's tilted knowledge. I don't know what to believe. Maybe they tired of being addicts, clover honey, garbage honey, accidental ice cream honey, ransomed, stamen, sweet sinful, will do anything for honey. Maybe they caught fevers at midnight with no one there to hold their stingers, no fat queen to press a cold compress. How will we currency honey from wildflowers, that liquid of languages? How pollinate in the bee's electrostatic absence? How will the bellbirds take it, the Canterbury birds? Who will cast the last skeleton in amber? I'll miss the noise, the palimpsestic clamor, soft shock of discovering a hive under your roof. The lull as each integer walked its body over a blossom, then flew away with its instructions. You sort of have to decide after the first poem if you're going to clap or not. And we have clappers. Yeah, you're in for long hooks. It's really awful when you don't. So I won't, because I usually preface what this book's about, but we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to say nothing. I'm just going to say that this is a poem and it opens it. It opens the book. And then I'll say something about it after. Dear life, I can't undo all I have done to myself, what I have let an appetite for love do to me. I've wanted all the world, its beauties and its injuries. Some days I think that is punishment enough. Often I received more than I'd asked, which is how this works. You fish in open water, ready to be wounded on what you reel in. Throwing it back was a nightmare. Throwing it back and seeing my own face as it disappeared into the dark water. Catching my tongue suddenly on metal, spitting the hook in my open palm. Dear life, I feel that hook today most keenly. Would you loosen the line? You'll listen if I ask you if you are the sort of life I think you are. So, you guys have no choice now. The fun fact about that poem is that it was published by The Guardian. The Guardian has a comment section, which is sort of unusual for poets. You don't usually get a comment section when you publish a poem. So, of course, the last thing you should ever do is read a comment section. And the first thing I did was read the comment section. I don't remember a single positive thing, if there were any positive things said about it, but I do remember the person who said, it makes a lot of sense that as a Romanian poet, she's writing about fishing because Romania has really strict fishing laws. And so clearly this is a poem about the indignities of Romanian fishing culture. And I thought, we as artists don't often know where our poems come from, but that was a real mystery to me. I did not know that's what I was writing about. So I'll read a poem. I'm off to, well, presumably I'll go visit St. Andrews, which is a place I've only been to once, but there are two poems about St. Andrews in here because it's a very, you totally see why Macbeth went on a killing spree there, right? When the North Sea is drawn out, and it's just beautiful and haunting in the most wonderful way. So, I mean, I meant that entirely positively. It's so beautiful. Love killing spree. It's really beautiful. And I should have prepared the page because now it feels like the poem doesn't exist. But it was in this book, wasn't it, Michael? Yeah, it's called Fight. Where is it in the book? We will find it eminently. Okay, it's section 2. There we go. Fight. The white sun has her way here, raising a fog like an atomized star over ruins, and the heron standing on one leg. Listen. Everything is listening to the North Sea retreating like a voice before sleep. Out there, the beloved is slipping through time. Otherwise, you might see without inquiry. When will the fog lift? By what doing? A faint hiss like a stone's lament, a faint hiss that is your own life now, hurrying from one light into another. So raise your hand if you've been to see a medium or a tarot card reader. Raise them proudly, please. Okay, look how many more when I said raise them proudly. That's actually amazing. We started with like 3 and we ended up at 6. Okay. Well, I've never been to one. No, I'm kidding. So this is an imagined conversation between the medium and the person who's coming to visit her. But it ends on a sort of riff on a Philip Larkin. You'll hear the echo to Larkin at the end. Reading. The medium says it is a past life connection. 2 lives, she amends, at least 2. This, my life, to mourn you, to work through that other life in which you died, a soldier writing letters from a border, and I never found a way back into daylight. Needless to say, this was not the good news I had hoped for. I thought she'd offer something conventionally hopeful, direct me to a trap door I failed to see. There was victory in the form of wands or swords, I couldn't say which, an end to grief so utter I'm the mouth it speaks with. What do I do? Thread the past through the present's eye, ask that we meet in the blasted heath between. She said, no, that won't be necessary. Just forgive him, first for living, then for dying. What are days for, if not to let go of days? I'm just going to end on one poem, and I'm, again, so grateful for your attention and so excited to hear you read, Michael, and thank you for that introduction. This poem riffs on Keats in a letter says the most beautiful thing, which is that sort of the purpose of suffering is to school an intelligence and make it a soul. So it's by suffering that an intelligence becomes a soul. And Rumi said, the wound is where the light enters us. And this is sort of in conversation with those 2 quotes. All inner life runs at some delay. Like the martyr amazed at hunger's slow subsiding. The rain at last arrived, and with it, the peculiar compulsion to keep living. On suffering, philosophers were always undecided. To school an intelligence and make it a soul, the wound is where the light enters us, and so on. The wound is where the light enters us. There shines the face of the beloved like a headlamp in the dark. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya. Always have such great finishing. That one really stuck in my head. What a day's fall, if not the like what days I've written on so many great final lines in this poems, just so much resolution that comes at the end of them. I think I often leave things entirely unresolved, more confused than where we started. So I'm going to read a little bit that's not in that book either, the Cat Prince one, in Maya's style, and do one from an older book to start with. And I thought I would read perhaps the most depressing bit from an otherwise quite optimistic book. I'm going to read a short section from the book Boyfriends, which was technically a non-fiction book, although I'd smuggled and Trojan horsed poetry into it by any means necessary, flattening those fuckers out, hiding them in between the chapters. Any way I could wedge them into the book, I got them in there. Some of them I had found and whipped out, but other ones they passed through the net by any means necessary. Now, Boyfriends is this super celebrated book. It's a love letter to friendship in all its incarnations. You know, the vitality of friendships, all those beautiful friends that punctuate our lives from our nascent years to school, to high school, to university if we go. How they collide together, how we contribute to them, the way friends fall in and out of our lives, to maybe sort of love, mourn and grieve friends with such a sort of fierce finality sometimes. You know, I'd still believe that collectively or singularly in a certain way we should consider whether our friendships are equal to, if not the greatest love affairs of our lives. There's such an exuberance to them, there's such an importance to them which can be subjugated in the light of longer term romantic relationships sometimes, rather than complementing, rather than feeling they all exist in the same orbit. So I really wanted to celebrate that and turn the loss of what was my best friend at the time into something of joy, something that reminded me what it was like to be close to him, to be in his company, to be galvanized and creatively inspired by him in circumstances. But my editor didn't want me to skip past the fact that there had been this grief, this cataclysmic grief that had just, wedged my world into. And she said, even if you don't want to write about it strictly through the story of that person, tell me about it more objectively, through a conduit of how it enters the body, physicality of grief from that perspective. So I wrote something quite indulgently long, and she ruthlessly edited it down, just handy given the time constraints of the night. Defying all science, grief feels its hottest when newly lit, before it's even started smoking, before the birds know to stop singing and be forever silent, before the embargo on mooting a date for the funeral's been lifted, before one of my friends knows not to throw a straw because I haven't got back to his invite for a camping trip that apparently needs the numbers, before any notion of talking in the past tense is fathomable, before Auden's poem Stop All the Clocks could possibly be about you. Feels like a drug. It's newly entered the body and will deliberately dawdle in making the rounds, inside like a virus, the flesh, bullying itself. My vital organs like two best friends who for no real reason fallen out, yet on account of their hubris will never find a way back. Grief dissects us into our most helpless matter. My bones carry an unnatural weight in them, as if the marrow is turning to lead. My gait too is off, like that bike with a bent wheel that required me to cycle like fuck just to make it to market less than 2 miles away. I'm on the cusp of crying, ordering a cappuccino, but ask for chocolate sprinkles all the same, because that's what I used to do, although I've no idea why, because I've never had a sweet tooth. I am desperate for touch, then offended by the suggestion. I find myself looking into my own eyes in every mirror I pass, eyes which have become bells that will not stop ringing till the jar cracks or the tongue falls out of the way. It'll be over. It's been clumsy with meaning after having prided myself on exactitude, where 140 characters feels a stretch. It feels like I've had my last useful thought and now I'm salvaging ideas from the mulch. Time is standing still until it races by like a fox with a bird in its belly. Mostly, I feel exhausted, slow, eddying, heavier, whilst emptied of something I know will never be replenished, that I will always resent living without. I'm heartbroken and coarse, whilst acutely thankful for all the wonderful, wonderful people around me. I feel important and guilty about it. So I'm going to segue into a love poem. I'm going to read a really short love poem from the Cat Prince book, because today we've been doing this really interesting project with Glasgow School of Art, where some of their final animation students have been making short film animations in response to some of my poems. Now, I was supposed to keep them quite short, to sort of a minute or under. I sort of selfishly wedged in a 3.5 minute there, which was like, animation's a slow process, which was a lot of work for that student. But thankfully it came off with the ruler. However, this is one of the shorter ones. It's a nice, clean-cut love poetry. I think it can be a sort of quietly contentious act sometimes to do this sort of naked, vulnerable, no holds bars love poetry at a point in time where we're taught so much to be careful, trepidatious about the vulnerability of our feelings, to be more complex than perhaps we want to be in order to put up masks and obfuscations and protections from that perspective, particularly when there's this sort of male stoicism, I think, that surrounds a lot of that open-hearted nature. There's lots of filthy, salacious, weird love poems in there, but this one is to convince you that I'm a decent human being. It's called Let the Lilac In. It's about when you have an exhausting day out there in the world, you just want to sit on your lover's lap and have them sit on your lap and stare at the moon. Having heard through the day, let me be your armchair by the night window. Unhaul, curry into this cradle of salt and butter, inject those wayfarer bones. Douse down the day's flare of voices, see the restless gritters sleep, or better still, delete themselves. Be held, a pebble lagooned in water's midnight minerals. Behold, moon, plated in the eyes of an owl. Starlight's lapidary scrawl, rallying the dark like hot ash caught on spider web. The luminescence graffitiing your slippers and sloshed onto the chin's timber. Hush now, as on my lap you begin a dreamer's mumble. Somnambulant lips search the air until finding my skin. So I'm going to read a poem I don't think I've ever read before, mainly because it has the word wonder in it. I think it might be the only poem in the book that has the word wonder in it, though I would like to think collectively they're all dripping in wonder in the most filthy fashion. Parklight. A kid, squat down on the edge of a curb, wonder drunk from slapping a gutter puddle with a stick, lying up towards the roof of a tree she can't fathom the crown of. The River Kelvin, writing scripture, performing miracles. A feral cat on the windowsill of the park warden's cottage, scowling in at a spoilt pet's sleeping spot. Imagining such easy dreamies, paw prints mark the glass. The ghost of snowmen, a hippie scavenger, holding a grimy rock up to the light, shaking off its dirt bunnies until shot through with flakes of a radiant opal. Just a crow without its metaphor for grief. Fox, strutting, insouciant, until changing trajectory, as if hearing carols in the distance and deciding to track them. A black bench with your name on it. An old can of iron brew wibbling on its bars. Come to think of it, it's just like the gloaming, to make everything appear more tigery. How quickly we come out of the moment. How long before it truly lets us leave. We touched a bit on the feline there. There was a sleeping cat in the park. There was a feral cat, the ghost of such. And I'm going to get deeper into that feline now. I was a fucking weird kid. Sure, that comes as no surprise at this juncture in time. This is the fully formed adult version of that growing child. As you might imagine, there were a few stumbling blocks during the early years, particular period. An epoch comes to mind. where I was convinced I was more feline than human child, that I was more cat than boy. On those play dates that my mother would force into action, fucking out, confectionery brides of some sort, I might imagine, I would insist on fully derobing, stark bollock naked, declaring myself the cat prince, and then proceeding to pound around these strangers' households trying to recruit their children into my naked cat gangs. Still not made for too many sequel play dates. For those that did somehow get pushed through the parapet, they came to the qualification, the caveat, I did not once more become the cat prince. To everybody's utter dismay, disbelief, incredulity, that very rarely deterred me. The cat prince hung around for a fucking long time longer than everyone expected. Some ways he's back stronger than ever. New collection of poems is called The Cat Prince and Other Poems. 50 other poems in there, all reduced, subjugated to the moniker and other poems to let the cat prince roam free. Okay. That was just the introduction. I appreciate the clap. I like that. I like that. There were a few points to the introduction, normally get a bigger laugh. I thought they're going to have to try and turn this into a serious piece. I'm into it. Thank you. Support on the front row. It's part of the game. Yeah. Often this comes on outfit change, so you've been spared. I have a mask sometimes I have to warn that, you know, the shirt off is as far as it will go. For me, that is. You know, if you feel, you know, inspired to become your inner cat during the poem, just let rip. Not sure if that's Lighthouse Books policy, but who would have an anti-cat transformation policy? I don't know. I am a cat prince. I declare, already on all fours, already balls naked, in the house of Hasty, where there's Adam Hasty, Daniel, and me, the cat prince. We're boyhood budbursts, 12 years of silliness. I should hasten to say, some other writers have asked me to remind the audience that 12 is not the collective age of the boys at this point in time. I was in fact 12 years old during this cat prince period. I've reminded them, but that's actually quite early on in the cat prince's reign. I said, maybe don't mention that. Yet here we are. Adam laughs, frantic gas, guffaws, then pegs it to the bedroom, anticipating the chase. Daniel, wavering between cat and laddie, compañero and fugitive, succumbs to the Gnostic glamour, strips naked for the full feline transformation. Down to our little bloods, little furs, ready to breach past the chide of absent classmates who might well hear of this and smite us with shame. For we are cuddle kings, hankering after Adam's adulation, or moggy, moxie. We embrace the cat life, vow inurement to the side effects. Carpet burns, scrotal pimpling, the sacrifice of language in each falsetto yell. As hunters, we're tasked by the Creator, our gaze a crosshair, our pounce a ripple of bravura. Who else so guilefully stalks sunbeams? We do well here. So's damn cats again. The neighbours would learn to yawp as I raced by with a robin redbreast between my jaws. And Daniel finishes shitting in the rhubarb patch. At that point, you maybe wish it wasn't a true story. 20 years later, we got a poem out of it. We wouldn't exactly say that means I'm winning. Dresses the odds. And it's convenient not to think of the killer in us, assassin still, holding back our part. As we coil our new cat bodies to a spring, Adam clambers fear atop the bed. What happens next is louder than we'd hoped for. Adam's mum, startled by this cacophony, arrives, then screams, curtailing the playdate. And later that night, she calls my mum concerned. But my mum, she never mentions this. I can only assume she was wise to it. The mythos, the hieroglyphs, fathom we'd soon meet the type of trouble that can really shake boys down. Long days where the teeth tears it out of us and the claws don't stop coming. But not yet, I hear her whisper, not without this moment's orchestra of feeling. As a boy, I was whiskerless, weighed down by the nest of not squat in my belly. As a cat, so much more. Of course, as mother to the cat prince, she knew all this. Thank you. So I'm going to do a super short poem to finish. Touched on these notions of friendship, the sort of vitality of that. And when I was growing up, I had a sort of really stoic working class father that didn't really have many friends around him. But my mum and my sister were just sort of pullulating with pals. My mum and her best pal would chat so much that when she came round the house, they would go into the toilet together, piss in a carousel, and come back out still having a conversation just further down the line. And I thought that was the epitome of a great friendship to me. I wanted a piece of that friendship pie. And my sister would have sleepovers all the time. They had this physical vocabulary to their friendship. They were linking arms. They were sleeping under the covers together, spilling secrets. It was such a sort of palpably loyal friendship. And I tried to emulate in that and all the male friendships I had around me at that point in time to absolutely disastrous effect, scaring friends off left, right, and centre. And I thought I wanted to write a sort of swan song from those failures, a little beacon of hope to the boys of the future. It's called Boys Holding Hands. Boys holding hands become men holding hands, because learning to dance starts haptic and here. A rumple of pinkies, the trill of palms, another skin blossoms beyond its sleeve, another fist unhooks to its petals like bud unhooks its own. The antithesis of the hand, where we are best friends. Slow suns, gauche promise, hold me, as language drifts through the throat of the wrist. Thank you very much. I'm going to welcome Maya back up here. And Elle guy there. Take out the way. I'll get my official looking clipboard. Thank you.
You ready?
Got the questions. But I like it there. I try and dismiss it. But then I know they're there.
I
We
feel
have a
like we have
panic
more
moment.
questions for you about the cat prints, but okay.
I feel like the cat prince is overexposed.
There can be no such thing. Are there photos? Like, is there photo? Well, you're right. The costume is nudity, so never mind. I put a mask on.
There's too much evidence. Yeah, no, I'm sort of trying to re-emulate what cat costumes now that have been coming out. Got these brilliant cat prince t-shirts, little masks going on. It felt it would be too much. I like doing it in darkened theatres where you can't see people's eyes, but here it's very.
I would gladly have worn a cat mask.
But there's next time. We'll get you back. Plans are afoot.
Plans are afoot.
So I sort of hinted at it, but I really wanted to. I guess I was just completely ensorcelled when I read your PhD. This is a simplified version of it, but it was on wonder in poetry, or at least quested into those realms, and I just couldn't wait to hear a bit more about it. So you're officially Dr. Maya Popa, and your PhD, which you got here in the UK, but is wonder wet. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the premise of it was to look at, so the book is called Wound is the Origin of Wonder, and the critical portion of this looks at the relationship between the word wonder and wound. And very early in my research, I stumbled upon, in a footnote, the fact that the etymology of wonder is thought to be a cognate of the old German Wunde or wound. So what this does to wonder is that, unlike all of its other semantic cousins, let's say awe or surprise or admiration, or there's a whole kind of field of words that are similar, is that wonder breaches the wanderer. It surpasses the wanderer. It makes what is being experienced ineffable or somehow beyond language. And so then it's the poet's job to bring that and fix that onto the page. And that's sort of what I was interested in, is how do poets enact wonder on the page? But by virtue of that, it's also a noun and a verb, right? We have a wonder as a noun, and then we have verb, the verb to wonder. And so I was interested in how one sort of goes from the noun to the verbness, because wonder demands that we ask questions, right? And if, part of the premise of this, or part of my argument, was that if we didn't die, wonder would not be what it is. It's very much linked to our mortality. For it to distinguish itself from all these other experiences of surprise, pleasure, or whatever, it's much more psychically complex. So it's and it's different from the sublime, in that the sublime is sort of the beautiful inflected by terror, right? So when you're standing at the edge of an abyss, I don't know, last time you sort of the edge of the abyss, but you know what I mean. You know that sort of that period of 19th century portraiture where you just have like sort of white dudes from the back on the edge of a tenebrous sky, and there's right. But that's a very interesting and very finely tuned relationship between terror and beauty. Wonder isn't that. It can be inflected by all sorts of things, but what it does is it makes you ask questions. It's not, wow, cool, but wow, right? It has that period of asking you to figure out what it's demanding of you, right? And that's inherently generative for writers. Wouldn't you agree? That sort of unsettledness.
Yeah, definitely. And who were, I guess, in all this sort of corpus of wonder wet poetry, who are like the doms, who are the archetypal wonder wet poets, who caught your gaze?
So I only, I sort of looked at the history of wonder briefly because you don't really have that many pages to do this. From medieval, let's say, or from the classical tradition, right? Because Plato said all poetry begins in wonder, right? So moving from there to Coleridge saying that basically linking philosophy and poetry. So I read a lot of phenomenology and then worked backwards to kind of come up with rubrics. So I looked at wonder in childhood and looked at Wordsworth and Coleridge because they're amazing. I mean, Wordsworth's prelude is, as you say, like saturated in states of wonder that are very quiet, and then Coleridge, less so the poetry, but much more so the Biographia Literaria, and all of the criticism that he writes is so much about wonder and arguing that adults essentially all of our senses are numb to the world, and children don't yet have that. But the real artist manages to maintain very much what you're doing in these poems, that sense of novelty and the impression of childhood. They manage to carry it out into adulthood and make something of it as adults on the page, unlike everyone else whose senses are sort of annihilated by the world. And then I looked at Rilke, so something of Archaic Torso of Apollo is a poem. It has one of the best endings, right? Do we know that ending? For there is no part that does not see you, you must change your life. The whole poem just ends, you must change your life. And the whole opening it's a Petrarchan sonnet. It's just like a really close description of a marble torso, and you're like, cool. And then the last two lines are, for here there is no part that does not see you, you must change your life. And you realize actually it's that the torso is looking at you the whole time. So you think this is just some dude like lingering on this torso in a museum, and then you realize it's actually that when we see something that inspires wonder, we feel we are being seen by the object, and we cannot return to the lives that we had prior to the experience. So it's fundamentally unsettling in that way. So I did Rilke and Keats as a chapter, and Keats is, and everyone's like, why is she going for so long about this? But Keats has a poem called on first reading Chapman's Homer. And the only translation of Homer that existed up to that point was Alexander Pope's, and it was in these classical couplets, right? Heroic couplets. And so it was dull as fuck. I mean, no offense, if you like Pope and that's your thing, then you would love this. But it was very accomplished and not full of that kind of verb that draws Keats and that Keats wrote from, right? That is a 20-something-year-old he was writing from. So Chapman translates it into a kind of vernacular English, and for the first time he reads it and feels like he didn't know Homer was this, right? It feels like it unlocks the text for him. And he stays up all night with his friend reading it. They're just reading it to each other. And then he's walking across London and writes this little sonnet that's so, so beautiful about the experience of that. So I wanted to look at sort of writers having experiences of wonder that they then translated. And then I looked a lot at Alice Oswald in the contemporary sphere of poetics, because I think she's one of the sort of preeminent poets of wonder in contemporary.
Yeah, I was at a reading with her that she did at the Edinburgh Book Festival at one point in time, and she talked about this poem she'd written about the dawn, I think, and she just lay every morning in the grass for a full month, and then would write a line of the poem, like piece by piece, and would just observe the dawn every day for a month over this period of time, and they assemble it one line at a time.
It's sort of like method acting for actors, right? It's like she becomes the thing she is trying to write about in an amazing way.
I'm so sort of fascinated and in awe of her when I see her. because she's just able to inhabit the sort of thoughtful silence with a comfort and with a vehemence and with a panache that I don't think I would ever be able to do. There was times during this talk where I'm sure she was silent for over a minute, just thinking about her answer. And it was sort of everyone's thinking whether she was going to come back to the question, and she is. She's just thinking really meticulously about it, and then she comes back with this like sculpted answer that seemed to feel no panic or no worry. That there was hundreds of people in the room just sort of waiting, basking in this silence with her. I thought that was a sort of wonder inspiring experience altogether.
Cosmic gravitas, right? She's sort of kind of like command in her presence. She's amazing. And the poem that I was looking at very closely for a chapter is The Swan, which is a poem that is just imagining a dead swan, the spirit of a dead swan as it leaves its body and looks at its body and wonders like, if that was my body. And it's just its internal conversation with its past self. And it enacts this, and then all of a sudden we go into the eye of the dead swan, and it's completely pitch black, but it takes us to the bells of a church where a bride is on her way to her wedding through the snow. And it's absolutely, it's like one of these things where I'm paraphrasing it, but I get chills even when I paraphrase it. It's a transformation that happens on the page so delicately. It formally shifts from these kind of jagged stanzas to these terses. And in discussing the poem, she says that it was a Yugoslavian oral story that she'd heard many years ago and was never found again, about a bride that gets sort of transformed on her way through the snow, and she could never find it, and she had to do something with it, and this becomes a kind of correlative for the swan. But this is wonder, right? This is the thing. It completely upends everything you think you know and delivers something that once you are with it is familiar, but you don't know how you got it, right?
Yeah, Norman McCaig had something about that as well, about that having like the first 10 years of our life just being completely enmeshed in wonder, and then we spend the rest of our life trying to resemble, recreate, imitate those experiences, get a sort of sumptuous taste of them again, trying to replicate them in an adult form. And it's like almost seems this period of dissatisfaction, but it's not. There's something really enriching and beautiful in chasing the wonder elements of it as well.
Absolutely. And the Romantics were so good at it. Even something like Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience, right? Like this aim to be unhurt and unhurting, right? If we get back to that, I mean, it's the sort of work of a life to get back to that childhood, but to have and to wield its brilliance that we have innately early on, and then bring it into the rest of our lives.
This sort of Scottish zealot in me jumps into your collection, and I know you've been here before, so I was looking for little glimpses of Scotland in it as well. I can't help myself. And obviously there's the poem Fife, which we'll come back to, but there was one called The Museum of Childhood.
Oh yes, there's 3 poems about, right, so that's my Edinburgh poem. There we go. Yeah.
And I wondered whether it was the actual Museum of Childhood on the Royal Mile.
It is 100% Museum of Childhood on the Royal Mile.
It obviously gets more metaphorical, and it talks about the childhood icons that we sort of lug around inside of ourselves as well. But I didn't know if there was a
yes, it was 100% that. And I have to say, I admit I've never actually been to the Museum of Childhood, but I came here years ago, saw that it existed, like saw it on the map, and I immediately sort of had to run. And I mean, it talks about pinwheels and these objects, these icons of childhood. It's just the fact that exists. I'm so thrilled that
some of them feel a bit spooky. There's some little occult
I then did
dolls in there.
That's actually why I didn't go. There were a little too many headless dolls for my taste for a Sunday afternoon.
But there's some great toys in there as well. I'd recommend it. Maybe it's on the cards tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe this is actually Museum of Childhood round 2. Like now, actually visit the museum and I write home from there.
Something comes back to you.
It might. Why not?
The neurological senses will be on fire.
Exactly, they already are.
Something exquisite you did in the book, which I hadn't seen before as well, as I came across the title poem and I was like, I can see why this is the title poem. There's some fucking brilliant line in it that I'd written down about what would you do with the knowledge that I grieve for a bee? I just thought it was an incredible line. I said, what would you do with that knowledge? I had to stop reading the poem for a time and perambulate around the room. But then as I read on in the collection, there was a second poem that shared the title. So I was like, oh, great, 2 title poems. That's super inventive. And then as you get towards the end of the book, there's a third poem. And I'd never seen a collection that had 3 poems that just sort of I guess, drilled home and championed and lionized the point is this is why it's the title. And I didn't know any other collection that had 3 title poems in there, so I was just commending that. Really.
Thank you for
Was that
commending it
planned
and
from
not
the
thinking
outset?
it was lazy. Yeah, I wanted each. There's 3 sections, so I wanted each section to have one of the title poems that just cemented the stakes again. And I think part of that's, that line, what would you do with the knowledge that I grieve for a bee, was partially, what will people do if they know how sensitive you are? I mean, I really wondered, like, if I am sitting here, this actually happened. There was a bee had entered the room, slammed against a window. It was engorged. He was clearly like drunk on pollen from a beautiful spring day in London. And then it just sort of sat there, and and I was with other people. All I wanted to do was rush over to the bee and check on it and make sure that it was okay and see what I could do for it. But it was kind of like, it was awkward because I was with a room full of people. And I thought, this actually is the kind of thing that someone who loves you and cares about you would find this, maybe a little baffling or charming, but also something to protect in you. But someone who doesn't might not, and I think we play so fast and loose with each other's lives very often, and people are not always their highest selves, right? So I sort of had to sit with that and think, what would, we hide so much of our vulnerability, and perhaps rightfully so, but maybe not. And but yes, I wanted each of those 3 poems to come back to this idea of, well, this is the stake of this, right?
Yeah, there was no question what the title should be when you'd.
Although my editor didn't like it at all. Yeah, so
Well, I'm glad you won that battle.
I did win that battle. I did. Yeah. I did. Actually, I will say that it's not even so much that I won it. They suggested a bunch of things. I said no, and then they were like, well, what about Wound is the Origin of Wonder? I think that's brilliant, because it was the title I had suggested originally. So I think I wore her down is really, so I don't know, but that's still a Pyrrhic victory is still a victory. Yeah.
I touched upon it briefly earlier, but I love some of your endings in the poems. I think you end poems sensationally. I think they can often be.
You do too. Really, really beautiful ending.
Wow.
Yeah.
Appreciate that coming from the sensei. And you give us so much resolution in a lot of the poems. And I think there can often be a pretense about giving that immensely satisfactory ending to the reader, as opposed to ending on a provocation or ending on sometimes more sort of wildly nebulous. But we can do that so dexterously within the body of the poem that to actually finish it on a beautiful yet still thoughtful resolve is such a gift. And your collection did that at so many different points. We talked on the one of them there. What are days for if not to let go of days? I love the first time we met, we said goodbye, then we never stopped saying it. And then also the sky filled with stars that had already been. So what is it? What draws you to that form of ending?
I'm like, if someone can make it an Instagram caption, then that's it. Against the sunset, I'm there. Laugh more, please. That was a joke. So that beautiful. I sort of feel like I was thinking.
That's just still going there. Too late. Too fucking late.
Did he laugh? Not the same. I think I always cite this. Jean Reese says that she talks about the great lake of writing, so that all writers are in conversation with all writers. And Eliot also says that all literature is happening simultaneously, which I think the first time I heard someone say that, I was like, that's the trippiest and most amazing idea, that all literature is happening simultaneously. So that Larkin, Larkin has that poem, what are days for? Days are where we live, right? And it ends with the doctors going around house to house. And so I feel that there's something in my ear that very often is thinking of other poems I've read when I finish my own, but not to borrow, but rather to feel into that conversation about whatever the primary sort of urgency or directive was to write this in the first place. How can I speak into that or speak to that a bit more at the end? And we all just have a kind of, our ears are calibrated to things. Like, I would love to be able to end poems the way you end them. And my ear probably just doesn't naturally take me there. I would labor more to do that. So I don't know what it says about me. Maybe, I don't know. But I don't ever want anything to be so tidy that it feels like it was, wrapped up in a bow. And so sometimes, actually, there are multiple drafts I'll go through where I'll end up cutting the last line. Because very often it's really the poem ends 2 lines above, and you've done that awkward thing of like, make like raising the register on the poem and making it so in fact, if anything, these are pared back endings. Yeah.
No, that's always my sort of go-to to sort of bedfellow in the editorial world is, could this poem start any later and could it end any earlier?
And most of the time the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Start a stanza in.
It's rare.
Because you're scaffolding, like you're creating scaffold for yourself, right? You're trying to hype yourself up to write the poem in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Do we have a couple of questions from the audience, and then maybe we could end with a short poem?
Sure, absolutely.
I have a question online.
Great.
Just in case the audience needs another moment to warm up.
Is it about the captains?
Yeah. No, not yet. It's a question from Teresa. How do you keep your wonder and curiosity in a world that sees reality and seriousness as proper ways to think? And reality and seriousness are in scare quotes.
Yeah. I mean, they should absolutely be in scare quotes because I don't even know what that means. Like, it's so fascinating. Says who, right? I mean, and I don't mean to go like very, very deeply metaphysical here, but you know, we live in a capitalist culture that relies on us buffering our unhappiness. That's the reality. Like, companies couldn't make money, Netflix couldn't make, potato chips wouldn't make money unless we came home exhausted and deferred all of our attention to something that exists beyond us and ate a lot of salt and sugar and whatever, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that once in a while as long as you're consciously choosing it. But that's the thing, is having a choice. And so I think part of wonder and part of paying attention, which is sort of the bedrock of all artistic forms, like artists just pay a lot of attention to the world. They cannot afford to lose their senses or to afford to give up their attention, which is the most precious thing any of us have. So reality doesn't exist. I mean, it's what you choose to pay attention to, right? It's like when two people are having a conversation, they'll walk away and think that went completely differently. And then you recognize there's no platonic one conversation that happened. The conversation was the space between these two intelligences, full of every experience that's come before for each of them taking place. So I think I feel like, if anything, I'm more grounded and more in touch with what's real because I'm not seduced by all of it, or I allow myself to be seduced by what I wish to be. And then I try very hard to come back to that state of wonder, because what the actual fuck? Like, no one knows why we're here. No one knows exactly how we got here. There are 1,000 books on craft and no one really knows how a poem gets made, right? So we are bathing in mystery at every stage, from the very beginning to the very end. So this is what's real, right?
Nice.
Thanks.
That was a manifesto. I follow it. The body and the mind are a business. They're a capitalist business, and we're most profitable when we're weakest.
That's
we're
absolutely right.
Walking around, we buy most. We try and push the way through it. We try and compensate for the sort of ulcerated nature of the way things make us feel. So if we do get these glimpses where we feel able to foment joy, or foment wonder, then you seize upon them, because it is it's addressing the balance. It's fighting back from that perspective, and sometimes it's forced, and it has to be deliberately forced, but that's fine. You know, if it's for a conducive, positive aim, and you have to sort of edge yourself into that position, then what more worthwhile an endeavor, a more noble a cause than to put yourself out there in that way, so that your wounds or vulnerabilities might be seen as a catalyst for someone else to, you know, put them into an armory, human physical armory, for that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Any more questions? One from in the room. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. No, that makes so much sense. That's beautiful. And I'm presuming you're a writer yourself if you're asking the question the way you're asking. That is part of it. I used to. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so cool when someone can recite a line back to you. It's like you feel like Taylor Swift for a second, right? Like it is the cool. So thank you. You just gave me a huge gift. I believe in a benign. I mean, Einstein said the only question there is this a benign universe? I believe in a benign universe. I believe in goodness, and I think I linger in grief because I think it's what I know what books on grief or what writing has done for me to metabolize my own grief. And this was a book written during the pandemic, so there's a lot of pain and a lot of grief in it. But ultimately, I just think the balances are towards goodness. I actually think our natural state of being is towards peace and joy and happiness, and that's part of the reason we also have to be really careful about feeling like it's normal to be stressed all the time and it's normal to be in a state of struggle. It's not. It's really not. And so, again, how do we take back some of this? But creating the poem, even when it's about something that's really sad or grieving, feels so hopeful because you're making something out of the thing that's just cut you at the knees, right? And so that's really, I think you must feel some of this too. It's like, it's restorative justice. No, it's like really the most restorative act. So, yes, I don't think I always, like with my self-deprecating humor, say it's so grim or whatever, but I hope there is real joy in it too, or at least if the beauty is redemptive, not the beauty of the writing, but the beauty of just existing and having cataloged what exists is redemptive. So I do take that patience. And if I ever had a poem that was purely grim, I would know I haven't done the work to actually see it yet. So thank you.
It's that thing, isn't it? Sometimes you have to dig for the testimony to survival within the poem, and you can take some of your most painful, traumatic, hurtful, humiliating experience you've ever encountered, you've ever endured, and turn them into something that lays the workings bare. And even if it does read as grim or painful, there's a positive notion in the fact that you're writing about this retrospectively, knowing that you did endure that, knowing that you survived it, knowing that bigger hurts or discomforts or comforts were coming your way, and you can now look back on this with a sapience or an understanding or a humor or a frustration, but regardless, you're beyond this experience now, manipulating it to a certain degree into a version of your truth, into a version of the story that you want to tell. So even if it's still painful to dig it up, there's a degree of ownership which comes that comes with recontextualizing that, because it will never be 100% truth. There will be fallibilities in it, whether that's to do with your memory or your own way of sort of cauterizing the wound or protecting yourself. It won't be this entire truthful version of you. There's a little bit in you there, whether consciously or subconsciously, which is manipulated it. And that's a power, wielding the power and being able to revisit that. Do we have a final question before we do a final poem? That doesn't mean it has to be like the greatest hit of all questions, It could be punchy, it could be curious. No?
We're sitting in the Alice Oswald silence, so we're really comfortable, right? This is that 1
Someone's
minute.
just marinating it.
Just putting it together right now.
There's so many topics in your book that I guess I was hoping to see, or was relish seeing, that I would expect to see in a book about wonder, especially the Museum of Childhood, also butterflies that came along. But okay, but then I was like all ready for this joyous poem about butterflies, and then of course it was about so much more than that. It was about what we do to the butterfly, how we tropicize them, how we stamp them there. And I thought that was such a sort of deft twist to the book, as the more joyful topics that we encountered, I guess, were some of the more deeply ruminative or self-reflective poems in the pieces as well.
I'm glad I no one's ever said that, so I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, you don't do it intentionally, right? It's not like I know how to make this butterfly poem interesting. Yeah. It's sort of like I just think it's sort of, I think there's there's a quote in there about Turgenev called them withered maples. He said they look like withered maples, and then I think you just go from there. But you must have the same Shirley thing, right? Like you hear something, and then you look for the objective about it. Like, what does this go with? It will sit in your brain for ages until you understand what is this actually a poem about. I have no idea, and you just leave it on the stove for long enough, and then it sort of comes together.
It's that secondary narrative. It's just bubbling away in the undertow.
Exactly.
I read this I was in conversation with Sarah Pascoe doing her first fiction novel, and there's a big bit about butterflies in it. And this blew my mind. Maybe everyone knew this already, but when the butterfly goes into cocoon, it doesn't just sort of, so the caterpillar goes into cocoon, it doesn't just sort of change shape and evolve wings. It actually breaks down into a part from sort of almost primordial goo of genetics and then rebuilds itself. I was,
Wild,
that's, you know, apropos nothing. I was just flabbergasted by it.
Your fun nature fact. For me
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it is fun. I mean, and again, it's like the fact that we don't know that and we don't think that's absolutely miraculous. It says much more about us than it does. I mean,
I'm still telling people about this. This event was a year ago.
No, but we should go into banks and say to all the people working in a bank, like, we're going to just tell you some insane nature facts and blow the top of your head off for a little bit. And then you go back into the world and see what happens when people actually start to appreciate things that we didn't make. You know, that's part of it.
Yeah. I think you definitely, with the butterfly poem, caused us to look at our assumed ownership over a lot of elements of the world from that perspective. The one about the hospital was fascinating as well. You sort of cast the fact that they were building this hospital on this park that you used to walk out and it came out of tarpaulin, but there was this intricate networks of wires that made me feel like I was looking at a spaceship at a certain point in time. And I guess it is this force for good, but it's a necessary evil. It's a force for good, which we hope not to be there. But I think there should be more poems about building hospitals. That being the first one I encountered.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
I think that's
Thank you for reading so carefully. It's a joy to be read like this. I really appreciate
I've not actually asked any of my questions apart from the one about the ending.
It's really, they're wonderful questions.
I think we got away with it. Would you read us a final poem,
Yes,
or do you want me to read it?
Yeah,
Then
you
you
go
can
first.
flip the book because I threw that on you.
You do that. Yeah, go first.
So I've always got sort of zesty finishers. I always try and finish on something like that. And then I was doing a reading the other day in London with Daljit Nagra, and he asked me to do a poem I'd never read before, which is, you know, one of the less uplifting poems in the book. But he got very excited about it, and he said it was his favourite piece and asked me to do it like it was, you know, the final trick at a kid's party. So I'm going to pretend that's what this is. It's about a bruise. It's called After the Fall. I feel so suave sitting down to do the poem. I don't normally do that. I only bounce around like I look like I'm about to pee myself, but this is me, demure. I got the biggest laugh of the night. From my perspective, my great jokes. After the fall. The bruise of you seeps beneath my body's bonnet. Hot wires its sinews, commandeers the bones. Up top, a hubcap of blood blackens into a dark uniform, sneakily moonish. The bruise speaks through every flex, because who doesn't push down when the pressure's rising? But a bruise is just a button, a public face, and the throb of you is not without its arms. The way the whole mess mends by mottling, from rain-soaked slate to a gentle mulberry, almost fuchsia, ripple of copper, rake of rusty dawn. Mere days into the corporeal fracas, my skin, the little traitor, near swallows the evidence. Though the bump still bellows below deck, a gurgle, a swan song hissing in the follicles, that little glow-in-the-dark star, limp and lifeless until its ultraviolets are fully charged. That said, the bruise of you is so very welcome to squat in me. Its twang through flesh, a shot of something sorely missed, a heavy-footed hair chasing the smudge of dusk. Thank you very much.
Just with my back to the audience, yeah. Like story time suddenly, you know, like, and I'm going to read you Mother Goose or something. I'll end on this poem because I always want to talk about Julian of Norwich, who's my favorite medieval mystic. I know we all have a favorite, and she's mine. And it is the most uplifting poem written during pandemic spring. And Julian is known for, I mean, she and Chaucer are first English writers, right? whatever that means. But in sort of in the Western Canada, that's where we start modern English. But she's known for all shall be well and all shall be well and all manner of things shall be well. Someone in your family may have a cushion embroidered with that on it. But and Eliot used it in the 4 quartets. But she also has these beautiful moments in the Revelations and the book of Showings. One in which Jesus comes to her, she's in a coma, and he's sitting on her bed, by her bedside, opens his palm, and she's like, well, what is that? And it's a hazelnut. She says, okay, Jesus. And I'm paraphrasing. And then he goes, again, I'm about to paraphrase very loosely, but everything you're worried about, like, this is it. This is the whole world. It's just this, just a hazelnut. And then, so that moment stayed with me throughout the pandemic, but this is about that. All that is made. The trees were on the verge of rebirth, so sudden you'd miss it from one day to the next. Would be suddenly alive in it, the pale green bending open to reveal what we'd always suspected was the case, that every bright thing has at its heart a hiddenness it offers when you've just about stopped looking. In her 30th year, Julian was dying. No other way to describe the proceeding of events, the widening gap between two kinds of life, the one lived and the one remembered. And Christ came to where she lay, fevered and helpless, sat by her bedside in velvet robes, and opened his palm to show her a hazelnut, saying, "This is all that is made." I wouldn't know mercy unless it looked like this, and I'd mistake it for love, though that too is what it is. I understand if you're not prepared to believe in miracles. The hours passed from one invisible hand to the next, but Julian lived to 73 in the 14th century. Maybe life's little more than our own blindness easing. Look, he said, keep looking. How small and round our suffering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. We've got some books to sign. There's now some complimentary drinks. If you want to ask a question more privately, you can do that now. If you just want to say hi, that'd be great. I'm sure Maya would be happy to squiggle in your book if you would like your name or something quirky that you thought of. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you so much to the Lighthouse Books. Thank you guys for coming. Most of all, thank you to the incredible Maya Popa.